Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. I said yesterday that we'll be back in a couple of weeks, but guess what? We're back one day later. So today we have somebody incredible that I would love, love, love for you guys to listen to. Sumit Agarwal, who's the founder and CEO of Ario. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but just to give you a little bit of background, I met him through a mutual connection, and I've been listening to him. I've been seeing the progression of his work over the last several months, and it's been truly amazing. So I bring this simply because we're on the forefront of data and um, in fact, I would say it's kind of like not just being on the forefront, but also thinking about things in a very different way. So this should be a very exciting conversation. At least I know it is for me. I hope it is for you as well. So, Sumit, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Yogesh. It's great to be here.
So I do this with everybody. So I always start off my show by asking you, um, tell us how you got to where you are. What's been your career trajectory?
Oh boy. Okay. Well, let's summarize that. I feel very, very fortunate to have just had a fantastic set of things that I've gotten to do. I came out of school in 1998. It's the dawn of the internet. I'm a chemical engineer. Like all good Indian boys in that era, I had to major in something that kept my med school route open. So I came very close to becoming a doctor, but the internet was blowing up. And so I
Mhm.
decided that, I should really go that route. I worked at a really interesting enterprise software company called Trilogy, which was sort of the last great hot startup in that sector, Salesforce automation before the internet. So it was a pre-internet company, right? Like box software, you can almost think of it as.
Yeah.
I ended up joining the Air Force while I was in college. And so I had a parallel path in my career, private sector, working in the internet, coming out to Silicon Valley by the year 2000. But in the public sector, in the government sector, working in the Air Force, first as a civil engineer, and then as a cybersecurity network warfare officer. And so that's a very important thread for me. I came out to Silicon Valley. I founded a company called Quova. It does something which is now 27 years old.
Mm.
It did IP geolocation. You give us an IP address, or you show up at a website, your IP address is presented, and we were able to figure out where you were physically located. And so 27 years ago, this was an interesting idea for language, localization. Can I show ads? Can I show various bits of content that matter? I mean, even things like Major League Sports. Can I show a baseball game in one region or geography versus another? These things matter, right? Rights management from the offline world coming into the online world. I joined a venture capital firm. After a couple of years of running that company, we grew up to 100 people, then hired grownups to run it. I was like 23 years old. Joined a venture capital firm as a PUP associate VC, learned the financing side of the startup ecosystem, joined Google in 2003, and had a fantastic 7-year run there all the way through 2009, 2010. Because of my military experience, I got picked up by the Obama administration to become a deputy assistant secretary of defense. So I was one of the youngest, maybe the youngest ever to have that position, and spent 2 years in the Pentagon. I guess now we call it the Department of War. And so I was there working on cybersecurity, network warfare types of issues. I met your co-founder, a guy named Derek, fantastic guy, and we founded a company called Shape Security. We grew that company up over the next 8 years to 100 million revenue roughly, and something like 600 or 700 people. We sold that company in January of 2020 to F5 Networks, and had a fantastic kind of journey as a startup, fantastic acquisition, fantastic 2 years at F5 as an acquired company. And that was obviously during the COVID era. And then after that all was done, we took the capabilities that we had developed at Shape. So it's a core team of Shape Security people, including our CTO, same CTO as at Shape Security. And we inverted it. That technology at Shape Security prevented people, unauthorized people, from logging into websites and mobile applications to extract data. We now perform authorized login to websites and mobile applications on behalf of end users to extract their data and create value. We'll get into the whole Ario story later. But in 2022, 2023, got done with that 2-year run at F5 and founded Ario. We raised a bunch of money and got off to the races. So here we are.
Oh my gosh. In 2 minutes, you've talked about so much, and there's so much I could be asking you about your background. But today, the conversation is about Ario. So I want to start first by, the phrase that I had not heard before, which you actually brought to my attention, was like this whole thing around customer activated data economy. So that's a new concept for a lot of people, right? It's not a well-known concept yet. So could you take a minute first to explain the premise of what does customer activated data economy actually mean?
Absolutely. It is really just the same historical cycle of something interesting emerging in the economy when fluidity and accessibility, ease of access and convenience all converge in a particular place. So before getting into CADE, let me just sort of give you a couple of analogs that will help contextualize what CADE, or customer activated data economy, really is. If we roll back the clock, even to the internet itself, what was sort of the dawn of the internet in the late 90s, early 00s? It was the democratization, the ease of access to HTML, to web programming. All of a sudden, a tiny number of people blew up into a huge number of people, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people who could do web programming, which was almost natural language readable, or human language readable anyway. And so that created this explosion of websites that became the foundation of the internet. Fast forward a little bit, the fluidity of creating ease of access around real estate, like the ability for me to post a room or a house or a car, has led to multi-billion-dollar companies. Turo for my car, Airbnb, obviously Uber, like I can put my time in my car, make that available, DoorDash. Every time you take a valuable asset, whether it's a physical asset, economic asset, financial asset, et cetera, and make it a lot easier for someone to access, millions of people to access, all new opportunities and value creation pools emerge in the economy. And so CADE, customer activated data economy, is the idea that when people have ready, easy availability to all of their data, they can get all of their Gmails, all of their DoorDash orders, all of their what's an Epic Medical, all of their medical records, all of the things they've listened to on Spotify, all of the things they've listened to on Netflix. When they have real access to that, not just the theoretical GDPR, CCPA, the regulatory rights that are granted. So everybody regulatorily owns all of their data. Every single stroke of key, every single swipe of mouse, every single thing you do on every single website, mobile app, you name it, in AI, not in AI, it doesn't matter, belongs to you legally, and you are allowed to request it from any company that has collected it. But of course, that idea of you're allowed to request it from any company is a gigantic loophole, in the sense that there's no constraint on the amount of friction that the company can impose. So most people have no idea, don't know, don't care. They don't get their data. There's no pool in the economy that offers them value for their data. And so you get this sort of lose-lose, which is where we are right now. Nobody needs to get their data. If you offered people their data, they would say, oh, why do I need that? No one's offering any value for that data. We have made a big bet of our time and our energy and our VC support, with our VC support, that really this is going to change over the next 3 to 5 years. And just as easily as you have $1,000 in your bank account, just as easily as you have 10 shares of Apple in your Robinhood account, just as easily as you have 50 shares of Bitcoin, 50 Bitcoins in your Coinbase account, you're now going to have the ability to just say, oh yeah, somebody wants to offer me value for my data. Somebody wants to serve me better by knowing what I listen to on podcasts, right? On Netflix or on Apple Podcasts. I can now give them that data, and they can give me value in return. And that value takes 2 fundamental forms: better service or better economics. I mean, I get a solicitation from Apple Music once a week that says, hey, Sumit, we'll give you 3 months free. We'll give you 6 months free. If you think about the math, that's like a $90 value that I consistently don't take. What do? I meekly shrug when Spotify sends me another notice that says, hey, Sumit, your Spotify price has gone up by $2, right?
Yeah.
I keep on getting Spotify price going up on one side, and I keep on getting more months of Amazon free on the other side. What is the one reason that I don't switch over? Playlists, right? I have 15 years of playlists. In the summer of 2015, when I met my spouse, there's a playlist for that, and it's priceless. It's 25 songs. It's like 50 bytes of information. It's nothing if you think about the data volume, but it's priceless and precious.
Yeah.
And there's just enough friction in me getting that playlist that I'm not going to do anything to take it out, put it on my computer, and move it. But in a CADE world, Amazon Music can say, hey, Yogesh, if you want to move over, click this button. And we'll just bring all of your playlists over because they belong to you. So you click that button, all of those playlists come down to your computer, your mobile phone, and then you transmit them to Amazon. That is a world in which I receive $90 of benefit. I receive much lower pricing. And by the way, that benefit will accrue not only to the people who switch to Amazon Music, it will accrue to all the people who don't switch to Amazon Music as well. Why? Because Spotify is not going to blithely keep on raising my price by $1. The fact that I'm locked in, right? Customer lock-in consistently allows the leading companies, they're not monopolists, they're not bad. I love Spotify, good company, right? I keep on using them. But they absolutely have the ability to keep on raising prices, primarily due to data lock-in. So CADE is the opposite of data lock-in. It's a world in which you can go move your data bank to bank, doctor to doctor. Those are the 2 mature fields, right? In the 2 most high value fields that exist, people's economic well-being and their physical well-being. From a health point of view, we actually have older technologies, ETL, ability to move all of your medical records from one doctor or medical system to another. Even though it's high friction, it's high value and people do it.
Yeah.
We're now expanding that to all commerce, all media, all sports, all food, all fitness, every sector. So that's what CADE is. Fluidity around your data that's going to create better service and better economics for all consumers.
You know, as you're describing this new world, right? This is so new that, you know, like I said, I had not heard of it until, you know, I started talking to you. And I almost feel like even from a market research industry perspective, you know, where, you know, an entire industry has been built around people interviewing others to get qualitative or, you know, survey-based information back. In this world where you have all this data available that belongs to you, you don't need to be surveyed anymore, potentially. Because if you have access to all this data, and if you decide to rent it or share it in some way, that's the economic value. And you can actually create a totally new ecosystem of how data collection actually can happen for, you know, market research or for anything that relates to brands that are wanting to understand their customers in a better way. Because if the customers got access to all their data, then it's a different transactional model basically that's being formulated here.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right?
So let's anchor this again in those historical precedents.
Yeah.
If you have spare cycles of an asset like a car, you can rent it out. If you have spare cycles of an asset like a room, which you're either not in your house because you're on vacation, or you're willing to let somebody stay in your house, or you're willing to have somebody take your entire house, you can rent it out. If you have spare cycles on your computer, you can actually download various apps that will just SETI, folding at home. You can allow all of these assets that you have that are spare cycles of an asset that are available to create value for you. Well, you have a giant data asset, and the only people creating value out of that are the people who are asserting data ownership rights. In some sense, I think of them as squatters. Love Google, love Apple, love Amazon, love all the big companies. But in many ways, they have asserted ownership rights over data. They exploit all of your data for trillions of dollars worth of value, and you really don't get any. It's sort of like saying that you rent a house, let's just say, and your landlord allows you to rent out your room on Airbnb, but they take all the money. That doesn't make any sense. If you've paid the full freight for that rent and you choose to rent out a spare room for a day, a week, a month, whatever it is, you should get the economic benefit. And so that's what the CADE world basically says. It's not a screed against all the big tech companies. I grew up in that space, in that ecosystem, learned from it, benefited from it. It's all good. Like, they'll keep on doing what they're doing. It's just a question of people waking up and realizing there's so much value for them. And I think that they're not going to realize that value in an abstract way. So we're not running around saying, hey, everybody, listen, you need to start caring about your data. People are busy. Friends, family, kids, jobs, careers, health. People are very, very busy. We don't want them to care about data in an abstract way. That's a boring concept. I tell people to value their data, they fall asleep before I'm done talking with the first sentence. What we care about is realizing that there are offers in the world that say, we'll serve you better. Like, they should care about clicking that button when Amazon Music says, move all of your playlists over. That would be a moment where they simply experience the benefit of CADE or of data fluidity, of the ability to move all their playlists over. So that's how we hope people will slowly grow into a CADE world, really by one beneficial transaction at a time, not with an abstract conversation about the value of data.
Amazing, amazing. So, you know, there's a lot that has to be true for that to happen, right? And you pointed out already a few of the friction points. So I want to just kind of, like, you know, unpack this, because this is where I think, you know, it starts with the mindset first. You know, consumers need to understand that this is their, like you said, this is their data, they own it, but they need to have access to it first and foremost. They need to know how to access it primarily. How are you thinking about how should people value it? Because no two consumers are going to be the same. They may have similar sets of data or different profiles of data. The valuation would look very different, I would imagine. Are you giving some thought to that, or is that something? Am I just making stuff up now? I'm just curious.
No. You're absolutely right. And I think that we work with our customers to try to create very, very simple, clear value exchanges. So and I'll give you a couple of examples that are already existing in the world. So in the CADE world, it's many to many, right? Any person, any company can exchange value, exchange data, and they can kind of do business, right? Like, that's what you want, is no friction and high fluidity when you're doing business around data. But we're in the precursor world to that. We're in the sort of penultimate final phase of evolution of data fluidity that comes before that. And so right now, there's kind of moderate friction, semi-fluid movement of data. I'll give you an example. You can go to Marriott, and down where you go pick up your DoorDash food that you order, right? There's like a little table, like in the last hotel I stayed at. And there's a placard there, a little plastic folded over placard that says, hey, Marriott and Starbucks are partners. Marriott and Uber are partners. You should link your accounts. And if you link your accounts, then you will get Marriott Bonvoy points, and you'll get whatever Uber's equivalent points are. I don't remember, whatever that value exchange is, every time you use Uber and every time you use Marriott. So there's a benefit to you. And of course, those two companies both being kind of peers and collaborators in the data space, travel space, are happy to share their data. And so that experience for you is you log into Uber through this particular interface, and you log into Marriott through the interface at the same time, roughly, and you do a handshake. And that handshake links those accounts. So data linking is one of many manifestations of CADE that is happening today. The only distinction between that activity and what I have in mind is that that requires significant amount of friction. First, two multi-billion-dollar parties, Marriott, Uber, have to go do a 2-year business development deal. So how many people are going to do that in the world? Like 10. There's like 10, 15 examples I can give you of these giant companies doing those deals. And then those companies promote and get value out into the hands of consumers. The good news is Delta Starbucks did this. 15 million people signed up in the first 6 months. 1.5 million people signed up in the first 10 days, practically. So millions and millions of people are experiencing really the precursor to a low friction, high fluidity world. It's a medium friction, medium fluidity world where you have these data linking opportunities. Plaid is another great example. Tens of millions of people are doing financial account linking through Plaid. There's no abstract conversation. There's no philosophical conversation about the value of data and how much is this worth and how much is that worth. If you want Robinhood to have ability to pull some money out of your bank account so you can buy stocks or buy Bitcoin or crypto or whatever it is, you do a data link. You tie those two accounts together with that online handshake. So many tens of millions of people have already experienced CADE in this particular form. I just want to take it to its logical conclusion, which is your data, pool by pool, vertical by vertical, is as readily available to you as a share of stock or as a tranche of $5,000 or $1,000. It's just readily available. Like we have credit cards that make credit so readily available. You have the ability to click a button, move data, click a button, move data. I think that this will cause thousands of dollars, soft and hard, doesn't have to be just dollar bills, of value to accrue in the hands of users. And you talked on one, the survey space. The survey space is a huge space, right? $100 billion space in which people are being asked really, I would call them borderline inappropriate questions. Inappropriate not in the moral sense, but inappropriate in the following sense. When you ask somebody on a survey, how much of X product did you buy? That is a terrible question to ask a human being. They don't remember. They don't know. What are they supposed to do? Go get a spreadsheet, like have it written down, like go look in their Amazon online account and tell you I bought 27 of these. That's a great question to ask to your data. Like, I'll just click this button and I will allow this survey to have momentary access to my data and look through and say, oh, you had 27 of those purchases. You paid this amount. Those Van Westendorp questions, how much do you pay for this? What's too much? What's too little? Those are complicated, painful questions for people. They're not lying, but they're not generally giving you terribly great signal because they're inappropriate questions for human beings. A human being's behavior is far more illustrative and illuminating than what they tell you in the moment of taking a survey. So it's not that surveys go away. Surveys are awesome to get into the why, into the how, into the color and the texture, the motivations, the underlying reasons people do things. That does not come out in your data. Other than in very obvious ways. Why did you buy that, set of diapers? Because there's a new baby in the house. I mean, that's fairly obvious. But there are many more interesting why questions that surveys are absolutely going to be at the heart of for indefinite period of time, as far as I can tell. But augmenting all surveys, I think, is something that data, and in a CADE world, data will do.
So, this almost requires almost like an infrastructure, almost like a data wallet or something, or dashboard. So that, okay, these are all the places I'm generating data today that is being tracked by companies, the Ubers, the Lyfts, the Marriotts of the world. I'm just thinking, as we were talking, I was thinking through my head, like, how many places does my data actually show up? It's like 24 locations possibly, but they're all fragmented right now. That's right. It's almost like having an infrastructure layer that says I can consolidate everything together. I can connect all that stuff together. And then suddenly you're right. There's a whole higher level of valuation that can happen for me as an individual, right? Because I'm using, the Marriott Bonvoys and the Lyfts and the Ubers and all that kind of stuff. So it's almost like creating a whole new set of companies that can offer solutions to consumers as well as to brands on how do you create those kinds of data exchanges and all that kind of stuff is what I'm kind of like suspecting. I think that's
Absolutely.
where you're kind of like playing right now by the sounds of it, right?
Yeah,
So
and what's that there are always analogs, right? There's always an analogy in the kind of historical past. So
yeah,
let's talk about one that's a direct analogy to what you're saying.
yeah,
We all fly on airplanes, and most of us fly on multiple different brands of airlines. We accumulate points. So
hmm
all of a sudden, you've got these stores of value that are
hmm
on different airlines. There's not one single place to put all of those points so that I can have total fluidity on those. But what
correct.
happens is that you can link all of those up underneath an award wallet. You can link all of those up in various places that are federated. So they're not
hmm
literally moving all of the points into a single repository where you can then transact around those points. They don't
hmm
need to. By giving you visibility into them in a consolidated way, they are almost giving you 80, 90% of the benefit of truly moving the points from one system to another,
hmm
and allowing you to know what you should do. So now you can look at the tickets, you can look at where you can spend, you can look at what you should do to go on vacation in a consolidated way,
hmm
and be able to make a better decision for yourself and for your family. So I think that moving all of the data is very hard. Like, how do you move it out of Uber? So Uber is the system of record. Amazon is the system of record in
Yeah.
which the data is generated and stored long term. But I think in a CADE world, you can federate that. You can basically say, well, I want either a consolidated view or I just want all of those data sources at my fingertips.
Yeah.
Now, if it's living inside of Uber versus living on my computer versus living in my Gmail, it kind of doesn't matter. At some point, the visibility and the ability to move the data around is all you really need. But I agree with you that many different variations of this are going to emerge, and lots of company opportunities are going to emerge. And we
Yeah.
certainly are chasing one of those.
But the reality though is that these point systems and reward systems blew up in the last decade or two simply because that was their loyalty program, right? That was their way of
Yes.
driving retention, right? But what you're now doing is you're flipping that paradigm completely, saying, yeah, there's a retention component to it, but there's also another component to it which nobody's really thought about. And you're coming in and saying that this is the new value that you can actually add to it. And if you're able to start bringing this information together, that holistic 360 view that you have of that consumer now suddenly becomes super, super interesting for everybody, quite frankly speaking, because I know, like, even, these smartphone companies, they've got first party data of their own that they're capturing, right? And they feel that they're not capturing everything, even though they're selling to billions of consumers around the world at the end of the day. So, but if they were able to tap into a consumer, from a Samsung or an Apple or whatever, and they're able to also see, the Ubers, the Lyfts, the Bonvoys, and everything else suddenly being part of that ecosystem in its entirety, that completely changes the profile of how devices get used, how um, brands like hotels can be thinking about offering new services and solutions. It just changes so many different things as a consequence of that in my mind. So
Yes.
I think you're onto something big here. So I want to get to your company Ario now, because that's where you're playing in right now. So tell us about what's Ario doing right now, and where, and we'll get into the future,
Sure, sure,
eventually.
sure.
Let's start with where you are right now. How far have you gotten with Ario? Let's tell us what Ario is, and then just tell us how far you've gotten so far.
So Ario is, I mean, you mentioned the kind of pre-existing companies in the space. Ario is basically the plaid for non-financial data. So we like the transactional data, the commerce data, the media consumption data, whether it's Spotify, Netflix,
Yeah.
athletic data, Strava. So we've built 100 plus connectors to all kinds of different companies. And under the privacy regulations, GDPR coming out of Europe, CCPA coming out of California, PIPEDA in Canada, under these privacy frameworks, which affect not 100% of people, but the vast majority of people in a
Mhm.
positive way, it affects them. People own their data. And so our position is that if somebody shows up and says, Yogesh, I am Amazon Music, and I
Mhm.
would like you to move your Spotify playlists into Amazon Music so that you can now enjoy higher quality service, lower cost. I'm just notionally making this up. I'm not saying what's better or worse.
Yeah.
You should be able to do that if you want.
Mhm.
That is what Ario enables. So Ario is trying to bring about one important aspect of CADE, the customer activated data economy. But we do that by going to enterprises, large B2C enterprises, and telling them, behave as if users have fluidity of data, have access to their data, make them an offer that is compelling, and value added, and let us be the infrastructure that makes that all come true. Let us make it easy for them to move the Spotify playlist over, move the Netflix watching data over. Like, we'll do the infrastructure layer. So that's what we are. We're a data connector company that provides data movement infrastructure that allows a consumer to, in under 15, 20, 30 seconds max, move a tranche of data or a repository of data from point A to point B. And so the consumer might receive a benefit that says, hey, we're Whole Foods. Whole Foods is going to offer you $10 off your next purchase if you bring over your Albertsons purchase history for 1 year in the space of grocery. Obviously, that's what Albertsons sells. Over. We want that data so we know how to serve you better, what coupons to send you, and we're willing to incentivize you to the tune of $10, $25 off of your next purchase if you move that data over. The primary reason that those kinds of offers don't exist in the world is that there's way too much friction in consumers getting their data. They just can't get access to their data. So we change that. One enterprise at a time, one offer at a time. We make it very easy for the enterprise to make the offer and for the consumer to fulfill the offer. They wouldn't be able to log in, scan 52 weeks worth of receipts. There's no shoebox full of all the receipts. I mean, receipt scanning apps exist, but those are in many ways saturated. There's a certain number of people in the United States or globally who are willing to perform those kinds of things because it's a lot of work. You or I are not going to do that most likely. So we're saying that amount of work is too high. The value prop is good. If we can collapse the amount of work to 15 seconds, boy, 10 million, 25 million, 100 million more people are now eligible for, willing to do 25 seconds worth of work in order to get $25 worth of value. And that data exchange is great for the brand, for the Albertsons, the Amazon, whoever was receiving the data. And it's great for the consumer because the consumer gets that value. So that is what Ario is out doing in the marketplace.
So there are a couple of things I wanted to just clarify. So, to do that, you have to talk to both sides. The in your example of Amazon versus Alberts or Whole Foods versus Albertsons, both have to have their terms and conditions set up in a way that you are also meeting their obligations. I would imagine. Is that a fair statement? Because extracting data, are there any limits from that perspective? I'm just curious to understand that.
If the conversation or if the situation were left in the hands of the company that has the data, let's just say that the data source in this case is Albertsons, or in this case is Spotify. Of course, there'd be no data. Like, those companies would never give you the ability to get your data out for any reason because it's not in their interest to do. But from a regulatory point of view, going all the way back to 2014, so we're 12 years into this regulatory framework, the rule has come down that basically says consumers own all their data. And so all we're doing is perfecting, or we're attempting to further perfect the regulatory principle and turn it into a practical reality. So right now the principle exists where you don't have to get Mother May I permission from Spotify to pull out your playlist. You don't have to ask, oh, do I have permission? What are your terms? I have to make sure I comply with your terms and conditions. That's not the case at all, because their terms and conditions simply say, well, you can't really get your data out. I mean, they don't want you to get your data out because the data is valuable. And I get that. Let me give you a quick analogy. Back in the 03, 04 timeframe, consumers were locked in to Verizon, to AT&T, to Singular Wireless, right, to the telcos, primarily because of their phone numbers. You didn't want to give up a phone number that all of your friends and family and loved one had, that had for 10 years, because that's really high friction. But at regulatory level, Congress came in and said, listen, security, it's not true what you guys are saying. It's not a security issue. It's not a logistical issue. It's not a technical issue. You have chosen the wireless companies, the telcos, to not allow phone number portability, but we now require you to provide phone number portability. Within 5 days of a consumer asking, they can deregister a number from Sprint, and they can re-register that number with AT&T, and they can move that number. So this was called phone number portability.
Right.
That regulatory framework produced a permanent, sustained movement of value to the tune of $200, roughly, into the hands of consumers. So every 2 years, you get $200 in general towards a new phone, new family plan, because that's basically the customer acquisition cost for a new customer. So what the telcos were doing was saying, listen, if I have an existing customer, that customer's locked in. I don't need to spend $200 acquiring that customer. In fact, I can only raise their price by 5% or 3% because they're not going to move. But a new customer, I have to pay $200 to acquire that new customer. That's their CAC. In a phone number portability world, all customers have the ready ability to move. So even your pre-existing customer has to be treated as if he or she is a new customer at the end of 2 years when the contract on the plan expires. And so that is a perfect analogy for what happens when you have data portability. Companies that have your data are not going to be jumping up and down telling you about their terms of service, because it doesn't matter what their terms of service say on some level. The rule is, at the government level, consumers own their data, and you have to make their data available to them. So those are the two rules under which we offer. Consumers own their data. There has to be some mechanism. It can be hard, it can be painful, that allows consumers to get their data. And we want companies to have to recompete for their own customers the way the telcos have to give you a fresh new tranche of value every 2 years. That's much better for consumers. And by the way, it made the telcos better companies. When there's no competition and there's lock-in, service gets worse. That's terrible.
True. So that's a great analogy. In fact, I was thinking about that too. So I'm glad you brought that up. So there's that part of it. The second part of this is consumer trust and consumer friction. You already talked the friction part. I get that. But talk about the trust aspect for this, because consumers have to trust that, their data is going to be secure and is private, and all that kind of stuff, especially when you're dealing with transactional data. I got the benefit of using your system to download my Amazon, history, right? As I was doing, I was thinking to myself, like, oh my gosh, I'm giving access to my account on Amazon. Is this secure? In the back of my mind, I was thinking about that. So could you just, help clarify that?
This is why, I was talking about my background in the military, 17 years, cybersecurity network warfare officer. My last company, right, that was a 10-year journey, was a cybersecurity company
right,
that focused on safeguarding consumer data inside these large enterprises. So it's something that we take very seriously, care about very deeply, and have a tremendous amount of expertise in. Absolutely. Security on one hand, which is keeping the data out of the hands of bad actors. Privacy, which is inadvertent sharing of the information with people that you don't want to see it without your permission. Those are very, very important principles. The irony here is that what we're doing, taking 1 year of XYZ data and moving it from point A to point B, and you getting a direct benefit, is so much more privacy friendly than what's currently happening, which is that cookies are on your computer, all of your data is being sold, bought, sold, advertised against willy-nilly. You're being targeted, things are being aimed at you that you may or may not want. You're being nudged and influenced in a million different ways. Like the real state of the data economy as it stands today is not really terribly privacy friendly. Every single company is out there putting its toes on the line of what the regulatory frameworks are. They're doing as much as they can to come as close to the edge as they can and say that they are following all the rules, but ultimately people have far less privacy than they would like. Every single time we sign up for a credit card, there's some grayed out checkbox in the online form. There's some paragraph buried in 18 pages of legalese. Did you read those? I didn't read those. I would put $10,000 down that 99.99999% of people do not read 18 paragraphs of legalese when they sign up for a new credit card. The part that they read was, you're going to get a $200 statement credit and 20% discount on whatever thing you're about to buy.
Yeah.
Right? So this is called do the math offers. You're in the middle of buying a high priced offer, and then you sign up for a credit card to buy that item, and you immediately get a discount on that item and you get a statement credit. That's all that people read.
Yeah.
But the reality is that your data is now being bought and sold at extremely high volume and extremely high velocity. So it's a great irony that people do worry correctly about privacy and security when they contemplate participating as active actors in the CADE and the customer activated data economy. But the reality is that their passive participation is a far less favorable situation than I would like it to be. But it is what it is. It's the state of the world. I will say that consumers react very favorably. When we raise proactively privacy and security, they say, let me get this straight. Google, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, all these big companies are doing whatever they want. I mean, I don't hate them. I don't think they're the bad companies. I'm not talking about me personally. I'm talking about the responses that we get from consumers. They don't have like a gripe per se, or like a fundamental bee in their bonnet about these big companies. They're happy with their iPhone. They're happy with their Gemini, AI searches, et cetera. But they do understand at what I call a gut calculus level, which is they don't have to be data professionals. They don't have to be security experts, but in their gut, there's a certain calculus being done. And they kind of get it. They're like, look, I know that I am the product for all these free services. I know that a lot of what's happening out there involves the buying and selling of my data. I don't know what to do about it. Nothing bad is happening in my life. My kid needs to go to school, so that's a much more pressing priority. I'm not going to think about this very hard. But I'll tell you that if you offer me some direct value for my data, I like that. And I'm not worried about privacy and security in that way, because I'm trusting. I'm willing to trust Amazon Music. I'm willing to trust Spotify. I'm willing to trust whoever that big brand is in this particular context, that there's a sufficient amount of security and privacy now that I'm receiving value. So it's kind of this irony. people are saying, well, when I'm receiving value, you want me to focus on privacy and security. But when I'm receiving no value, you just want me to click the cookie consent and move on with my day. So there's like an interesting dichotomy there that people do get. They're wiser to the situation than we who are security professionals would often give them credit for being.
So given what you just said, I'm just thinking about, like, you can almost segment the population in a way, or those who are going to be early adopters for this new world that you're describing, and there'll be the laggards and the late adopters, or that'll take their time to move over, either due to inertia or lack of understanding, or just not having the energy to do it because other things in their lives are more important. Are you seeing anything right now already, or are you feeling like that there is a way to segment the population and be able to target them, to be able to have them switch over to a world like this?
Yes and no. I think the first part of your point I fully agree with, which is that there absolutely is a whole distribution of people. And I don't even know that it correlates with age. I think it's actually a more complex distribution. Because if you think, I mean, my mom is an avid Facebook user, right? I mean, you look at social media, and in many ways, the very old have even more time to spend on social media. The people who are retired then do the very young, or then do the mid-career professionals. So I don't know what exactly drives the distribution, but certainly there is a distribution of people who are more apt, more willing to lean in and not. But we're not targeting people on their propensity to participate, because there's no switchover. There's no like, oh, I was doing A, B, C before, now I have to do D, E, F. There's no moment where you have to do this. All you have to do is evaluate one atomic opportunity at a time. So for example, I have Lyft and Uber on my phone. I am 90% favorable in terms of using Uber just for habitual reasons. There's absolutely nothing that is superior about my Uber experience versus my Lyft experience. It's just pure habituation. However, I open up Lyft about 10% of the time, anytime the Uber time for the car to get to me is greater than 7 minutes or 5 minutes, like right in there. If it's greater than 5 to 7 minutes, that's when I leave Uber going. Like the ride's being called, it's taking a while, and I fire up Lyft. And what I've discovered, Yogesh, in the last 6 months is that Lyft has been 90% of the time cheaper. So like this idea has lodged in my mind that Lyft is like consistently cheaper, but I'm so heavily habituated to using Uber that I continue to use Uber. If Lyft got in there and said, "Sumit, really, what's keeping you in Uber is that they have so much context." Like I land in a city anywhere in the US, because I've traveled a lot of places, like you've traveled a lot of places, and it has my friend's address. It has the restaurant I go to. It has the hotel that I go to. It has that historical. So the simple fact of Uber having my history in every major city that I travel to, every small city I travel to for that matter, is amazingly powerful and helps create lock-in. And the ultimate result of lock-in is that I'm willing to pay a higher price. That's not a great outcome for me. Good outcome for Uber. So if Lyft were to create an atomic offer, right? When I say atomic, I just mean very small, very self-compartmentalized, that just says, Sumit, give us 12 months of your Uber address history. That's a very simple thing. Just give us the address history that's in Uber. And by the way, you click this one button, and because that button's powered by Ario, moving that address history out of Uber and into Lyft is easy. It's 15 seconds, like one touch basically. Then we'll give you $25 off your next Lyft, right? So that's like the one in the moment compelling offer. And you get to enjoy basically 15% lower prices consistently on a go-forward basis. That is not a philosophical question about you being in one world and moving to a new world. It's an offer you evaluate in the moment. Some people will take that offer on the spot. Some people will think about it. Some people will reject it. But all of those people, regardless of which group they were in, are going to get a different offer 3 more months from now, which is about music, a different offer 4 more months from now, which is about media, a different offer 3 more months from now, which is about food or fitness, about DoorDash. It doesn't matter. I just want people to start seeing more and more of these offers. And at some point in time, the ROI will tip over for them. And they'll simply say like, oh, I get it. Like this actually makes a lot of sense to me. And I'm happy to do it. Not all people need to do it. But if people begin doing this in reasonable numbers and meaningful numbers, it will actually benefit everybody, because I want to create competitiveness in the ecosystem. And competitiveness will directly flow from this data fluidity, because loyalty and lock-in are related concepts. Loyalty is simply the velvet glove that surrounds the iron fist of lock-in, right? It gives you a reason to prefer United Airlines, even when their price was 10% higher and the route was 2% worse. That's really what loyalty means, because you want the points. You feel like you have an aggregate benefit in accumulating the points that exceeds the short-term inconvenience. Reality is, I don't play the loyalty game that way. Whatever is the best flight for me on Kayak is the one that I take. It doesn't matter. I just accumulate the points on that airline. So we want a world in which people are able to enjoy better service because their data is fluid. And so people don't have to make a macro decision, like I'm sharing all my data for all time. They make micro decisions. I'm willing to give one company 1 year of data access in return for one benefit. And that value equation either makes sense to me or doesn't. And if it doesn't, I move on. And if it does, I do it and I still move on. So we're not asking people to make a big decision. We want them to make a series of small decisions to sort of gradually move into the CADE world.
I understand that. So from a brand perspective, this opens up a lot of interesting thoughts, right? I'm the Uber that's got the data. You told me why they may be collecting it, but ultimately they have to give it based on the consumers rights at the end of the day, get that part of it. But if I'm a brand, this puts pressure now on all the brands to think about their customer experience. And not that it wasn't there before. Of course, it's been there. But with this shift, are you seeing how in your interactions with the brands, what kind of conversations are you having with them apart from the infrastructure, the executional aspects of it? But are you getting into conversations around what kind of experiences they should be thinking about offering?
Absolutely.
As well?
Absolutely. I mean, most major brands that I talk to are terrified about being totally disintermediated by AI.
Right.
And so they need to figure out how to make their experience so much better than it is today that people have a reason to come use their experiences. Otherwise, I mean, we joke, we call Gemini or ChatGPT the last app. Why do I need to go to an individual app when I can just talk to this thing that has access to all the apps on my phone and all of my data? Let me give you a quick example of data fluidity that I love right in the AI space.
Yeah.
On the homepage of Gemini, Yogesh, I logged in last week. I usually use it on my phone, so it's mostly via voice. So I actually don't see as much of Gemini visually. I use it in the car a lot. I use it on the plane a lot. I use it with headphones a lot. So I logged in on my computer for some reason. And there was a giant solicitation that said, hey, you should bring the context from ChatGPT over to Gemini.
Yep.
Gemini will be able to serve you better if you bring over the totality of your ChatGPT context. And how does this work? I mean, I didn't have a deal with Google or with Gemini, unfortunately. How does it work? There's no technical infrastructure. You copy paste a paragraph long prompt. If you click the button that says, yes, I want to do this, Gemini then opens up a window and says, here's a paragraph long prompt instructing ChatGPT on what to do. Pull out all of the user's queries over the last 12 months, summarize them, aggregate them, categorize them, do all these 5 things. And then this giant 2-page response will occur in ChatGPT. And Gemini says, and then you drag your mouse over that 2-page response, which is just a blob of data, and you copy paste it. So the user is the transfer mechanism. First, you have to copy paste this giant paragraph prompt into ChatGPT. Then you copy paste the result into Gemini. That is data movement, but that's a today data movement. That's not a CADE data movement. That's a high friction, low fluidity movement that only a small number of people are going to do. The one touch is the world that we live in, and it will force Gemini and force ChatGPT to viciously compete to serve the users better, even more so than they are now, which is what we want.
I think Claude is offering that one touch right now, if I'm not mistaken.
I'll have to
I
go
saw
check it out.
something pop up. I haven't tried it. I've been thinking about trying it. I just haven't had the time to do it. But I think they're creating that one touch experience that you're talking about, that you can just lift out of ChatGPT and bring it over to Claude. And, just being fully transparent here, I started, learning obviously through ChatGPT, but over the last couple of months, Claude has been a far better experience for me than ChatGPT. So
Absolutely.
and there are issues with Claude that I have, but keeping all that stuff aside, to your point, I think you're right. It's going to raise the bar for everybody to improve the quality of their customer experience. I think people have to be thinking about this and not wait for it to happen to them. When they start seeing, for example, oh, more of my consumers are shifting away, then I start thinking about the customer experience. The game's already done by that point. You need to be thinking about it now, is what I'm thinking about, basically.
Absolutely. I agree. So the conversation that we have with brands all boil down to, it's either innovate and delight the consumer or die. Die doesn't mean literally go out of business, but it means you give up margin. It means you give up control of the consumer experience. And what that boils down to is someone else is going to own that consumer experience and you become commoditized.
Yeah. So in this world that you're describing, right, where suddenly if you have access to all of your own data now, the way you're describing it as a consumer, I could see a world where you could be having your own agent that is analyzing your own data, and then you could delegate to that agent decision making on certain things for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that is the vision. I mean, we actually tried to build that app a couple of years ago, and it was very difficult. But I think that is the world that we're going to emerge into, where you actually pipe data directly into the AI agents because they can serve you better.
Yep.
Hey, I see that you've got in your browse data on Amazon these 5 products. You haven't bought one of those products. You clearly want one of those products. Let me go do background research for you while you're sleeping.
Yep. So from an agentic commerce perspective, that becomes a very interesting angle. And also from a digital twin perspective, it opens up a totally different use case for digital twins in my mind.
Absolutely. I think we make a joke about the digital twin space. We've been spending time talking to various companies in that space.
Yeah.
That's a great point. You can have a gold-backed currency or not. And so why would you want a digital twin that was based on synthetic data when you can literally make 330 million digital twins you wanted that are backed by one real life individual human with 5 years of historical data, 5 being a trained number, and week by week updates because people's lives change, their preferences evolve, their habits differ from month to month, year to year. And so this thing is not only backed by a single real user, it is evolving and growing as that user evolves and grows. So I think that the digital twin space is very, very interesting. I'm bullish on ones that are based on real users versus synthetic. I think with synthetics, you end up with averages, and I don't think anybody needs more averages. The idea of this is what 10,000 men who live in a certain zip, who have a certain age and a certain income think is a very, very well-worn path. Lots of great companies that cover that space. I don't know that that's the most exciting frontier to me. I think we call it segment of one, like understanding a twin that represents one real user, which is really in many ways why Google and Facebook are as powerful as they are. They like, if you think about it, there's no homepage to Google. Like, what does google.com mean? What does facebook.com mean? If you actually land on facebook.com, it's because you're logged out. And the only thing you can do is log in. The homepage of Facebook is really facebook.com/Yogesh, linkedin.com/Yogesh. That is a website that has no manifestation for more users than one at a time. That's the future that we envision for all of these brands, which is you don't log into wholefoods.com or kroger.com or whatever.com. You're logging into something that is tailored to you and personalized to you from the very first page view.
Amazing. So you said you've been having lots of conversations. Have you built a digital twin yet? I'm curious.
We are not building digital twins. We want to go to the people who are either digital twin companies or not digital twin companies per se, but really just want more data so they can better serve their customers. And in some ways, building the twin versus saying, hey, I'm going to use data to serve you better are not totally different. They're just different spots on a continuum. Digital twin one is a little bit more robust and a little bit more 360. You might just say, look, I want to help you with your food and your recipes. I'm going to send you these really well-tailored, well-selected recipes. I'm talking about a grocery chain about this based on the food that you have that you bought. So that's a smaller version of like doing something that requires a representation of you in data. So we want to be a data enabler company, just like Plaid is in many ways. We're not going to go build twins ourselves because I think that that's a whole separate level of expertise, and there'll be a lot of competition in that space.
100%. And to that point, like I have been talking to a few companies that have been playing around with the digital twin concept. In fact, we had Adam Bay on a couple of weeks ago.
Panaplay.
From Panaplay, right? So he was on this podcast as well, and he was telling us about how they're doing it. They're obviously using synthetic data right now, but I can see, for example, I may be speaking out of turn here, but a partnership opportunity, perhaps, where, their technology, your technology, suddenly, if they're connected, you suddenly have now, completely revolutionized how we should be thinking about the insight space as a consequence of that, So
I think so. We were just at a conference actually in Washington, D.C., the IIEX Customer Insights Conference. And how you use AI and how you use data were probably the two hottest topics.
Of course.
Right? To kind of revolutionize and improve this space.
You're right. Unfortunately, I wasn't there, but I was definitely seeing all the posts on LinkedIn, and I was having people text me all the time, but I do think that this is a conversation that's not going to go away anytime soon. And more importantly, I think we need companies like Panoplay and you and yours to be the ones who are rethinking the paradigms of how to think about all of this stuff and reshape how the future looks as a consequence of that. You're not anchored to how things were done in the past. You're actually anchoring in terms of what needs to be in the future. And I think that's really the message that I'm taking away from this conversation, is that I'm just amazed at how far you've gone so quickly in terms of how you're building out your infrastructure, because this is a totally new way of thinking about things, right?
Thanks, Yogesh. I agree. It is new.
So I think that's really, really cool. So just to kind of like bring it full circle, as you look to the future now, what does what are the implications for companies like Google and Apple and Amazon and Meta with what you're describing as CADE right now?
I'm very bullish on those companies. I think they're going to
Yeah.
continue to thrive, continue to grow.
Yeah.
I think that as the overall pie expands,
Mm-hmm.
more players can participate and more companies can benefit. So I don't view it as a zero-sum game where one company benefits, another company loses.
Yeah.
I don't think that phone number portability caused the telcos to lose. Like the overall pie expanded, service got better, more service prices got lower, the pie got bigger. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that those companies are going to continue to do fantastic things and innovate and
Yeah.
aggressive things, and that's all fine. That's the nature of being such a large company. I
Yeah.
think really the tension is that more and more value is going to consolidate in the AI agents in particular,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that the non-top 5, top 10 tech companies have an opportunity in CADE to participate much more strongly in better serving customers, in avoiding commoditization than they did before. I mean, in some ways, Instacart, great company, I use Instacart all the time, tends to commoditize grocery. I don't care which one I'm a loyalty member of. I don't care which one has a better storefront or better display. I'm not going there, right? The individual person is going there on my behalf. So that's the tension that I perceive. And there's no question in terms of the direction that the big tech guys and gals are going, right? Those companies are headed in the direction of ever better service for consumers, consolidating more and more economic power. If you have the ability to influence or direct where an individual consumer is going, tremendous amount of economic power in the ecosystem. And so I think that I see the bigger opportunity for CADE for the people that don't have enormous amounts of data. Google itself quietly has the equivalent of a receipt scanning app with 20, 30, 40 million people. The reason it's not bigger is it doesn't need to be any bigger. Like they've already got so much external data flowing in, so much first party data that it's not clear how much more data they need to continue to do a fantastic job. So I don't see CADE as something that is as big of a deal for the top 10 largest data holders, data processors, as I do for the other 99% of the economy.
Amazing. So we're almost up at time now. So last couple of questions. As you think about what people should do, what could they do Monday morning based on this conversation that you and I've just had right now? What would be the one or two things you would advise them to do?
I think that it depends on who you are, where you are. But let me just give one macro statement and a couple of tactical statements. The macro statement is you should envision a world in which any data source that a consumer has is available simply by asking. So whatever topic you're researching, strategizing, planning, imagining, whatever it is that you're working on, there's data that would weigh on that question or topic. There's data that would help you make a better set of decisions. So just imagine that data were either available directly to you or were available to the people that you're going to go talk to qualitatively or quantitatively, and that they could give you that data if you ask them for that data. What would that do to change the conversation? That's exactly the thing I have in every single one of the conversations I have with brands and companies. And they say, well, we don't spend a lot of time thinking about useless questions because the data is not available. So I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it. And I show them a few thousand profiles of XYZ data to sort of make the point. I mean, I showed you your data. I showed them their data to start. And that is when the light bulb clicks on and they say, holy smokes, if for the first time, 1,000 records at a time, 1,000 rows of transactional history at a time, and I'm just using 1,000 as an arbitrary number, are available to a consumer. And now that means they're available to me as a marketer, as a consumer insights director, as a whatever researcher. That is a life-changing potential opportunity. I can have so much better of a conversation with somebody rather than saying, well, what do you like to do? Which brand do you like? And say, now that I know you love this brand, now that I know that you loved XYZ brand 3 years ago, and now you love ABC brand, and you switched exactly 14 months ago, let me get into the why of your behavior, not the what. So the data is brilliant at answering what. Talking to people, quantitatively, qualitatively, surveys or otherwise, is great at the why. And so that is currently muddied and muddled. And as a result, surveys suck. People hate taking surveys. They're basically almost borderline disrespectful. Like you're asking stupid questions to which I don't really know the answer. And so I'm going to give you stupid answers, right? It's that whole thing about play stupid games, win stupid prizes, ask stupid questions, get stupid answers. So I think that to turn that into a couple of quick analogies, any survey that you issue to a person, we call it question 11, should have an 11th question on this notional 10 question survey that just says, oh, by the way, whatever the topic was, batteries, beverages, baby shoes, whatever it was, would you please share with me 1 year of transactional data around that topic from whatever data source you want? And then you go talk to Ario, talk to a company like Ario to do the data infrastructure enablement on that. Mm-hmm. That's really the very tactical thing. So we believe that within the next 12 to 24 months, all surveys are going to have a data sharing component because there's no reason not to. It only makes the survey better.
Yeah. Makes sense. Amazing. Listen, man, you have shared so much. My mind is blowing, literally, in terms of how you've reframed everything for us, literally in the last hour or so. So let me ask you this as a final question. Where can people find you? What's the best way to connect with you?
ariodata.com, ARIO data.com is our website. Email me directly, sumit@ariodata.com, SUMIT@ariodata.com. You Google us up, it'll come right up. And we'd love to have a conversation if people are interested. There's a lot to share, lots of case studies, lots of feedback, lots of insight we're getting from these large brands that we're talking to.
Fantastic. Maybe there's a way I can also help, and partner with you on some of the things I'm working on. So you never know how things
Absolutely.
can
go. Absolutely. That'd be wonderful.
And, listen, Sumit, this has been just an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for making time, out of your busy schedule. I know you were traveling, you were at the conference until last night and you flew in, back to get back home. And then you're on this podcast with me this morning for your, because you're in the Bay Area. So thank you so much for making time to be with me today.
Thank you, Yogesh. It was great. Enjoyed the conversation.
All right. Well, for everybody else, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll be back in a couple of weeks, literally a couple of weeks this time. No kidding, because I'm also going to be on the road starting next week. So thank you for listening and stay tuned.